Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to get into a good mystery.
Well, today's case is a real head-scratcher. It's the death of a man named Uglaza back in 2007.
Oh, yeah, this one. It's been years, but I still remember it vividly. So many twists and turns.
Exactly. Picture this, San Francisco, 2007. You've got this vibrant young guy found dead in his locked apartment.
Locked apartment.
Yeah, and not just dead, covered in blood, signs of a struggle everywhere, furniture overturned, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like a pretty straightforward homicide, but you said locked apartment.
From the inside. And to make things even more confusing, no murder weapon anywhere.
Okay, now it's getting interesting. How could that even be possible? Did they ever figure it out?
That's the million-dollar question. Was it a suicide made to look like a murder? Did someone stage the scene and vanish into thin air? That's what we're going to try and figure out today.
We'll have to examine every detail, every piece of evidence, every theory.
And trust me, there are a lot of theories swirling around this case. But before we get into all that, let's rewind a bit and get to know Uglaza.
Good idea. Who was this guy?
Well, from what we've gathered, he was a real charmer. French-American, a sound engineer, worked for a toy company.
A toy company. That sounds like a fun job.
Right. I know, kind of unexpected.
Yeah.
But it seems he was pretty successful, had a good life going on.
What about his personality? Friends, family, any enemies?
Lots of friends, close circle, and definitely no shortage of female companions either. In fact, he was known to date several women at the same time.
That's interesting. A bit of a ladies' man. Might be relevant later on.
Oh, definitely relevant.
Think
We'll
right?
get into that aspect later.
Yeah.
But for now, let's focus on the night everything changed.
The last night of his life.
Exactly. Uglaza went out that night, dinner with a colleague, then met up with some friends at a club.
That typical night out in San Francisco.
Seems like it. And everyone who saw him that night said the same thing. He was in a great mood, having fun, no signs of trouble whatsoever.
And then
Well, he was last seen walking home alone around 2 a.m.
walking home alone at that hour. I guess that wasn't unusual for him.
Apparently not. But that's the last anyone saw of him alive.
Setting the scene for a true mystery.
Exactly. It wasn't until the next morning that things took a dark turn. His neighbor, alerted by Uglaza's dog barking like crazy, went to check on him.
What happened? Did the neighbor find him?
Yes. Found the door ajar, and, well, let's just say it wasn't a pretty sight. Uglaza was lying in a pool of his own blood, lifeless.
Oh, wow. That's awful. Did the police have any initial thoughts on what happened?
They initially thought suicide. You've got the locked doors, no sign of forced entry, no obvious suspects.
Plus, maybe some personal struggles they didn't know about.
Could be. Plus, there's this added wrinkle. Uglaza's ex-girlfriend, Melissa, mentioned during her interview that he was fascinated by samurai culture.
Samurai culture, how does that fit in?
The lead detective later claimed that Melissa was the first to suggest suicide because of that. But Melissa denies ever saying that.
Okay, so a bit of a he said, she said situation there.
Right. But the samurai connection is definitely intriguing. But even with the suicide theory, some things didn't quite add up.
What do you mean?
Well, for starters, the apartment was a mess. A broken watch on the floor, TV overturned, blood stains all over the place, like a real struggle went down.
So it looked like there was a fight, but the doors were locked from the inside.
Yeah, which was one of the first contradictions.
And what about that missing murder weapon you mentioned earlier?
That's the big one. 3 stab wounds, but no knife to be found. It just vanished into thin air.
That is strange. Did the police have any explanation for that?
They first thought maybe he washed the knife and hid it before dying, but
But with 3 stab wounds, that seems very unlikely, even impossible.
exactly, it just doesn't make sense. And then there's the fact that his cell phone was right there on the nightstand, untouched.
You'd think if someone was attacking him or if he was in distress, he would have at least tried to call for help, right?
Right. So you've got a locked apartment, no murder weapon, an untouched phone. It's all very perplexing. And there's one more detail that adds to the confusion.
What's that?
The neighbors. 2 of them told police they heard weird noises around the time Uglaza would have died. A loud thud, and then sounds of someone running down the stairs.
Okay, that's unsettling. Someone running away from the scene, perhaps. But how could they get out of a locked apartment building?
Exactly. The police really seemed to focus on the suicide angle early on, even bringing it up to the neighbors very early in the investigation.
Which, of course, makes the neighbors suspicious. Sounds like this investigation is already full of twists and turns.
Oh, you have no idea. Just wait till we dive into the autopsy report. That's where things get really interesting. But we'll save that for after a quick.
So before we get to the autopsy, Let's go back to Uglaza's dating life.
Right, because remember, he was seeing multiple women at the time.
Exactly. And not just dating, kind of playing the field, you know?
Adds a whole new layer of intrigue, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Could be a jealous ex, a vengeful partner, who knows?
It's like something straight out of a movie.
Well, real life can be even more dramatic than the movies sometimes.
True that. So we've got the suicide theory, the possibility of a random attack, and now a potential love triangle gone wrong.
Don't forget, we haven't even touched on the French investigation yet.
Ah, yes, the French connection. That's where things really start to shift.
Big time. They took this case seriously, way more than the San Francisco PD, it seems.
They interviewed tons of people, over 50, re-examined all the evidence, even flew out to San Francisco to see the crime scene for themselves.
Talk about thorough.
Right? And their big discovery, the one that blew the case wide open, unknown DNA on Uglaza's watch band.
Uh-huh. So there was someone else there, someone the San Francisco police missed.
It didn't match any of the known people in the case. Family, friends, girlfriends, nobody.
And on the watch band. Sounds like a struggle.
Exactly. Someone grabbing his wrist, maybe during a fight.
Which means,
Someone else was in that apartment. Homicide seems more and more likely.
well, the French were convinced. They officially declared it a homicide. No doubt in their minds.
Wow. 100% certain. That's a bold statement.
It was. It basically put the San Francisco PD's investigation under a microscope.
I can imagine. Made them look pretty bad.
But even with this new DNA evidence, the San Francisco medical examiner, Dr. Azar, wouldn't change her stance.
She's stuck with undetermined.
Yep, undetermined. It's like she had blinders on, only focused on what she saw at the initial autopsy.
So on one hand, you've got the French saying homicide, and on the other, you've got Dr. Azar saying, I don't know, it's a mess.
A real mess. And poor Uglaza's family and friends are stuck in the middle, still searching for answers.
That's where Melissa, his ex-girlfriend, really stepped up. She wasn't going to let this go.
She filed a citizen complaint against the San Francisco PD.
That's right. She felt they mishandled the investigation, brushed it under the rug.
And you know what? She wasn't entirely wrong.
What do you mean?
The complaint revealed some major problems within the department. Communication breakdowns, resources not being used properly, just a general lack of urgency when it came to this case.
So not intentional wrongdoing, but more like incompetence.
Pretty much. Even the lead detective on the case admitted that things could have been done better.
Wow, a rare admission from law enforcement.
It was. And Melissa's complaint, though it didn't solve the mystery, it did force the SFPD to make some changes.
So at least something good came out of it.
Right. But Uglaza's case was still a question mark.
Until a new police chief came along.
Ah, yes. George Gascon. Remember him?
Vaguely. What was his role in all of this?
He was all about reform, transparency, wanted to take another look at cold cases that had been neglected.
So he took an interest in Uglaza's case.
He did. He met with Uglaza's family, listened to their concerns, promised to try and get to the bottom of it.
And he did more than just talk, right?
Oh, much more. He brought in the big guns. The LAPD.
The LAPD. Why?
Fresh eyes. A new perspective, untainted by the mess the SFPD made of things.
Interesting. And what they uncovered was shocking. A bombshell, really.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What did the LAPD find?
A hidden report, buried in the SFPD's files. A report that had been commissioned years earlier by the police themselves. A report from an independent medical examiner.
And this report said what?
Homicide. Straight up homicide. The report had been sitting there, gathering dust, all this time.
So the SFPD had evidence pointing towards murder, but just ignored it. Why?
Nobody knows for sure, and to this day, no one's been held accountable for burying that report.
That's infuriating.
Totally. And for Uglaza's family, it was devastating to know that the truth had been hidden from them all along.
So let's talk about this hidden report. Who wrote it, and what exactly did it say?
It was written by Dr. Michael Ferentz, a top forensic pathologist. He looked at everything, the crime scene photos, the autopsy, the witness statements.
And he came to a different conclusion than Dr. Azar.
Completely different. He found tons of evidence that screamed homicide.
Like what? Give me the details. Well, for starters, the blood splatter. Near the stairs. Dr. Ferentz said it was consistent with stabbing motions, not someone stabbing themselves.
Ah, so the blood told a different story than what Dr. Azar saw.
Exactly. And there was more. He found a defensive wound on Uglaza's palm, like he was grabbing the knife blade during a struggle.
He fought back.
It seems so. And remember the whole why didn't he call for help question? Dr. Ferentz had an answer for that too.
What was it?
He said the neck wound was so deep he probably lost consciousness almost instantly. No time to reach for the phone.
So we've got the French investigation saying homicide, and now this hidden report saying the same thing. It's got to be case closed, right?
You would think so, but
There's another twist, isn't there?
there always is with this case. Even with all this new evidence, Dr. Azar still wouldn't budge.
Still stuck on these undetermined. Unbelievable.
I know, right? She said that without a confession or an eyewitness, she couldn't officially change her stance.
It's like they were so close to finally getting justice, but...
Just out of reach. But this case, it's not over yet. There's one more twist to come. It's mind-boggling, isn't it? 2 separate reports, both pointing to homicide, and Dr. Azar still wouldn't budge. It's like she was fixated on that initial assessment.
I know. It's so frustrating, especially for Uglaza's family. They've been through so much, fighting for years to get answers.
Absolutely. They deserved closure. They deserved to know what truly happened to Uglaza.
And the sad part is, the trail seems to have gone cold.
Mhm.
No new leads, no sudden breakthroughs, nothing.
That's what often happens with cold cases, unfortunately. Time passes, memories fade, evidence gets lost.
It's like hitting a brick wall. But, there's always that tiny sliver of hope. Maybe something will turn up, some new piece of information.
You never know. Sometimes it just takes that one spark to reignite the investigation.
What kind of spark are we talking about here?
Well, technology is always advancing. Remember that unknown DNA on the watch band?
Yeah. Do you think they could retest it or something?
It's possible. DNA analysis has come a long way since 2007. Maybe a new test could pinpoint exactly who that DNA belonged to.
That's a good point. It could even lead to a match in some criminal database.
Right. And even if it doesn't, there might be other avenues to explore. Maybe someone remembers something they saw that night, a detail they didn't think was important at the time.
Or what about the murder weapon? Any chance it could still turn up after all these years?
It's a long shot, but it does happen. You hear stories about things being found decades later.
It's like a puzzle. Each piece of information, no matter how small, could be vital.
Exactly. And that's where public awareness comes in. Podcasts like this one, media attention, online forums, it all helps.
Keeps the case alive in people's minds.
Right. Maybe someone out there knows something, saw something, but they haven't connected the dots yet.
Maybe listening to this will jog someone's memory.
We can only hope. But the point is, Uglaza's story needs to be told.
Absolutely. His life was cut short, and he deserves justice. His family deserves justice.
They do. Their persistence, their refusal to give up, it's inspiring.
It shows that even when things seem hopeless, hope should never die.
Right. And if anyone out there has any information, no matter how small, they should contact the San Francisco Police Department. You never know. Your tip could be the one that finally cracks the case wide open.
Well, this deep dive has been a wild ride. From a seemingly straightforward suicide to a hidden report, international investigations, it's been a whirlwind of information.
And even after all this, we're still left with questions. But hopefully, by sharing Uglaza's story, by shedding light on the complexities of cold cases, we can contribute to the pursuit of justice, not just for him, but for everyone whose cases remain unsolved.
So to our listeners, if you were the detective, where would you go from here? What would you investigate? What clues would you follow? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And maybe, just maybe, your insights could help bring Uglaza's story to a close. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, every mystery deserves a deep dive.